Okay, so what is economics? Economics starts with the word scarcity. But what is scarcity? Scarcity is the idea that we cannot have everything we want. As much as we'd like to have, there are limits that keep us from having everything. What are these limits? Scarce resources. Why are these resources scarce? Because they're hard to find. Money is a great example. Let's say you want a phone and a laptop, but you don't have enough money to buy both. You're forced to choose between the two. Even if you have enough money to buy both, you'll still have to choose between buying those things or buying other stuff. What I'm trying to say is that you can never have enough money, which makes it a scarce resource. Time is another scarce resource. Suppose you need to work, but you also want to play on your Xbox. You can go to work, or you can play video games, but you can't do both at the same time. Of course, you can do one after the other, but there's only 24 hours in a day. By doing one thing, you'll have to cut another thing from your schedule. So, what is economics? Economics is a study of how people make decisions, given the resources, scarce resources, that are provided to them. But it's not just about people. It's also how businesses and governments make decisions as well. Economics is a study of how our society as a whole uses its resources.
The typical first-year student walks into his first economics class with very little idea of what economics is. He might have heard something like, economics is the study of money, or economics is another word for accounting, or economics is hard, don't take that class. But none of those are true. Economics is the study of the use of scarce resources that have alternative uses. That's the classic definition of economics. Basically, there are people, and people need resources to fulfill their desires. These resources cannot be infinite, but the desires can be, so people need to make choices about how to use their scarce resources. Economists study these choices. All economic questions fall into one of two categories, positive and normative. Positive economics describes what is, and normative economics argues for what ought to be. So a question like, why do people use money, is a positive question, and should people use money is a normative question. A general rule of thumb is that if your economic model has no value judgments, it's positive economics. Whereas if it does have value judgments, it's normative economics. Since to tell someone what he ought to do, you first have to judge what is best for him. Economics is also divided into microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics studies the behavior of individual agents and markets, while macroeconomics studies the behavior of the entire economy.
Microeconomics looks at economic problems faced by individual units within the overall economy. We will be looking at particular individuals, families, and firms. Let's look at some examples of the kinds of questions that microeconomics aims to answer. If Daniel gets a raise at his job, how will this affect his consumption of goods? If the Johnson family's rent goes up, how will this affect the amount that they save? Or, if the price of steel goes up, what will happen to the amount of cars that Toyota sells? So when you think micro, think small. Macroeconomics looks at economic problems faced by the nation as a whole. Some questions that macroeconomics aims to answer are, if households have to pay more taxes, what happens to national savings? Or, what will happen when we increase the money supply? So when you think macro, think big.